Hi everyone! So today we're going to be talking about all things beneficial bugs related. Now I have been experimenting for the last few months using a new type of beneficial bug in my house as an alternative form of pest control. I have used different types of beneficial bugs in the past, and I am going to talk to you about every type of beneficial bug today, or at least the main ones that you would be probably interested in using for your houseplants and the pros and cons of each. But I want to start with predatory mites because that is the specific ones that I have been testing out over the last few months. Now, at its core, beneficial bugs, they exist outside in nature in the wild, and they help to keep the bad pests on plants under control. It is a checks and balances type system, if you will, and if our plants lived outside and they got thrips, mealies, spider mites, whatever it may be, these beneficial bugs naturally are existing out there and can go eat the population of the bad pests and keep things under control. But in our homes, these good bugs typically don't have a way to come in unless we personally bring them in, which is exactly what I did. So the first beneficial bugs that I want to talk about are actually predatory mites. These are some of the best options for you to combat spider mites in your home. Now, there are a bunch of different companies that sell beneficial bugs, but I chose to go with Nature's Good Guys. And the reason I did that is because they actually offer smaller quantities that you can purchase at a time compared to some of the other companies that really seem to be targeting more like nurseries or big stores who needs like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of products at a time. Now, there are multiple types of predatory mites, and I am going to run through the different types and what you need to know about them in order to choose the ones that are correct for you here in a second. But before we even get into that, when you are looking at purchasing predatory mites, you need to decide if you're buying them for preventative purposes or if you're treating an active infestation. I needed them for both because at the time that I started experimenting with predatory mites, I had an active infestation of spider mites that was pretty bad on both my white fusion calathea and my caladium hilo beauty. So that was the intention there, was to get that under control. But then I was also just worried about the rest of my plants because we were at that time of year when spider mites tend to have a bit of an uptick. So I wanted preventative measures to be taken on all of my other plants. So Nature's Good Guys sells two different options depending on if you need it for preventative or an active infestation. The first option is actually hanging sachets, and these contain unhatched predatory mites that will then hatch over the course of 2 to 4 weeks. And they take care of any spider mites that may be on your plants that you may not have seen yet, because we all know you really typically don't even notice they're there until you start to see the damage on the leaves or the webbing around the leaves. And if you need a video all about spider mites, I have that for you. I will link it down in the description below for you. But if you have an active infestation, you really aren't going to want to wait 2 to 4 weeks for the pest to hatch. So in that instance, Nature's Good Guys sells vials of live adults to help get that infestation under control right away. And how many mites are contained in a vial is up to you. They offer a bunch of different quantities. Same thing with the hanging sachets. You can get ones with like 250 mites in them, or I think also ones with 1,000 mites each in them. And on their website, they have very good instructions and helpful information to help you decide exactly how many of each you need to get depending on how large a plant is, how infested it is, etc. But what are the different types of predatory mites? And I am going to be referencing literature from them because it's just a lot to remember, you guys. There are a lot of different mites. And one of the biggest things, though, that you really need to consider when choosing the mites that are right for you is actually temperature and humidity. So you may not be aware, but some of these mites will survive in certain temperatures and others will not. So for example, my southern facing windows get pretty warm, especially this time of year. So I needed a mite that was going to be able to survive the high temperatures. So let's just run through these real quick. So almost all of these are going to attack, well, all of them are going to attack the two-spotted spider mite, which is the main spider mite that you're probably going to encounter on your houseplants. They do, however, work on other spider mites, and some of them work on other pests. So the first one here is Amblicius andersoni. These will feed on many, many different species of mites, and they are actually known for their ability to tolerate high temperatures. So it says here they can handle a temperature range of 42 degrees to 100 degrees Fahrenheit and need humidity between 40 and 60%. The next one is Neoscelius californicus. This is also one that will attack many species of mites. The nice thing about this one, it does also tolerate the high temperatures, but it actually will survive longer than other mites without food. And we will get into what happens when there aren't actually pests on your plants and you use beneficial bugs here in a bit. But this one says it will survive in temperatures of 50 degrees Fahrenheit to 110 degrees Fahrenheit and humidity preference of 40 to 80%. Next is Amblicius cucumaris, I believe is how it is pronounced. This one is actually interesting because it is actually a predator in both the nymph and adult stage. So a lot of the beneficial bugs will either be predators in both stages of life or only in one stage of life, but this one, it is in both. But this one cannot handle as high of temperature. So it says 43 degrees Fahrenheit to 90 degrees Fahrenheit and wants higher humidity, 60 to 90%. Next up, and this is a super popular one because not only does it attack many types of mites, but it will also attack whitefly larvae and thrip larvae. So if you got a problem with thrips, this might be a good one for you to check out. Amblicius Swirsky, I think that's how it's pronounced. And so this one though has a pretty kind of low temperature range though. So 50 degrees Fahrenheit to 85 degrees Fahrenheit, and the humidity needs to be a little bit higher, 65 to 75%. Now, if you are not sure which one of these is right for you, or you're kind of going back and forth between a few, Nature's Good Guys does actually offer a special blend, which is a combination of a lot of these mites and also a different mite, which is called Phytocelius persimilis. This is going to be a rough pronunciation kind of video, you guys. So this is another predatory mite that will attack two spotted spider mites. The temperature range for this one is 43 degrees Fahrenheit to 90 degrees Fahrenheit, humidity 60 to 90%. So this special blend is actually what I decided to go for my active infestation. I actually reached out to them and asked them, and they told me they thought this would be the best option. And so that's what I ordered for the Hilo Beauty and for the White Fuchsia Calathea. Now, for the preventative measures I wanted to take on the other plants, I decided to go with the predatory mites that could tolerate the highest temperature range, since I do have so many plants in my southern facing windows. So it was the Neosilius californicus sachets that I got. So how exactly do predatory mites work? Well, first of all, these are going to be shipped to you on a 2-day delivery, I believe it is. And they do include a cold pack inside of the package to help keep the mites alive. Now, when you receive the package, you're going to want to open it up immediately. If you are not going to be able to use the beneficial bugs right at that moment, you need to put them in your fridge. You can store them for up to 48 hours in a temperature range of 42 degrees to, I believe it's 48. Yes, 48 degrees Fahrenheit, but only for 48 hours max. You really want to use them as soon as possible, but it also is recommended that you use them at nighttime or first thing in the morning, or when grow lights are off. Now, the hanging sachets are really simple to use, you guys. You basically are just going to read the directions about how many you need to hang per square footage of plant. Figure out if that's 1 per plant, 2 per plant, whatever it may be. I think most of my plants just got 1, except for ones that are this large. I believe got 2 or 3. I think this one got 3. Most of my other large plants only needed 2. And you want to hang them in the leaves somewhere. You're just going to hang them on a branch. You're going to want to make sure too, if they are in a window, that hopefully they're kind of shaded by some leaves from getting too much direct light on them. And then you're going to be good to go. Like I said, they will hatch and start to crawl out of a tiny little hole in the top of that sachet over the course of 2 to 4 weeks. Now, if you want to know if they actually came out or not, you start to see kind of, I'm going to call it dust, because they're in some kind of like sawdusty looking type stuff inside of that sachet. And when they crawl out, they tend to pull some of that with them and it gets on the plant. And that is kind of how I know that they've hatched and they've come out. It is really important to kind of look for that as well, because if 2 to 4 weeks goes by and you don't have any signs that anything's come out of that sachet, you're probably going to want to call the company and let them know that you're pretty sure you received sachets of dead mites. And that did happen to me, you guys. We will get to that in a second. But if you do have a plant where you're kind of like, well, it's going to be difficult for me to hang a sachet on here somewhere that's going to work, that's in the foliage line, what you can do in that situation is what I did for my Maranta. I just attached the sachet to a chopstick with just a twist tie, and then I put that chopstick in the top of the plant so that the sachet was hanging above the leaves. Now, they do recommend that if you're using the hanging sachets for preventative measures, that you replace them once a month. But let's move on to how it works when you're using the active adults that come in that little vial. These are going to get shipped to you the same way. It's going to be a little vial. They're going to have taped that lid on because those mites are small enough to really kind of crawl through the cracks around that lid, even though that lid is tightly secured. So same thing here. If you can't use them right away, you can store them in the fridge for up to 48 hours, but ideally you want to use them as soon as possible. Now, you have to prep your plants a bit more when you have an active infestation. So the first thing you need to do is make sure that you have removed all webbing that is currently on that plant. You want to knock down all of the webbing that you're seeing. You then want to lightly mist the leaves before you apply the beneficial bugs. Now, after that, you are going to apply the beneficial bugs, and there are two ways to do it, but before that, it is very important that you rotate that vial. So basically, they say just gently kind of roll it in between your hands, gently turn it side to side, because you want to evenly distribute the mites through there. And this is especially important if, like me, you're going to be using that vial on multiple different plants. If you're just putting them all on one plant, probably doesn't matter. So make sure you're rotating that to distribute the mites. And then your first option is just to sprinkle the mites directly on the leaves. I personally found this to be a bit of a mess, and I felt like stuff was falling off on the sides and whatnot. So anticipating that this might be what happened, I decided to go ahead and also order some release boxes that they sell. So these are just little cardboard boxes that pop together pretty easily. They have a hanging tab on them so that you can hang them on the plant just like you do with the hanging sachets. Now, once again, if you don't have an easy way to hang it, which on my White Fusion Calathea, it would have had a hard time supporting the weight. So once again, I just used a chopstick and a twist tie to attach the box to that, stuck it into the plant, and then you're just gonna sprinkle the beneficial bugs into that box, and they will just crawl out of that box and onto your plants. Now, after you've sprinkled them in all of your plants, there will still be mites crawling around inside of that bottle and probably on the cap. So what you're gonna wanna do is just set those upside down in one of the plants that you've treated so they can just continue to crawl out. Now, when you do open that vial, you guys, one of the first things you actually probably should do is check to make sure those mites are alive. So I did order 2 vials because I had to treat more than once for those active infestations. And once again, they have really good instructions on how frequently you have to do that. You can do it either weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, depending on how bad the infestation is. Once again, their website has really good information for how to use these based on your specific situation, and I will link their website down below for you. But when you go to open that vial, you should see mites start to crawl around. You should see them crawling around on that cap. If this is going to wig you out, put on gloves before you open that vial. And the nice thing about predatory mites is, unlike spider mites that are really kind of hard to see with the naked eye, you can definitely see the predatory mites with the naked eye. However, since I do have a handy dandy digital microscope now, I went ahead and took a closer look for you. So warning, if this is going to creep you out to see these bugs up close and alive and crawling around, now would be the time to shut your eyes, and I will let you know when you can open them again. But here is what the special blend of predatory mites looks like. The easiest ones that you're going to be able to see are the red ones. Those are the ones that will indicate to you, oh, if something's alive in here. You will see them crawling around as soon as you take that lid off. The other ones are a little bit harder to see just because they're a lighter, more translucent color. They are easier to see on the plant, but as you can see, they are quite a bit larger than your regular spider mites. So if you do open your vial, by the way, if you shut your eyes, you are clear now, all clear, all good. You can open them again. I promise I won't show you active crawling around live mites again in this video. But if you open that vial and you do determine that you are seeing nothing happening, which is what happened on my second order, you need to contact the company and let them know that you're pretty sure you've received dead predatory mites. I did this. They were very understanding. They shipped me out a replacement at no cost. It did take almost a week for them to ship it. I'm not sure why, but they took care of it. No questions asked. The next ones came in. They were alive. It was all good. So let's talk about what's going to happen next. And this kind of tripped me out a little bit, but all of a sudden, the next day after applying these predatory mites to my White Fusion Calathea and my Halo Beauty, I started to see massive amounts of webbing. And just so you guys know, predatory mites do not create webs. Only spider mites create webs. So I was kind of like, what the hey? How come all of a sudden it looks even worse, this infestation on my plants? Well, that's because the spider mites are going on the defensive. And so they're actually trying to create more webs more quickly to try to protect themselves from all of these beneficial bugs that you've just released on the plant that are trying to eat the crap out of them. So if you do see an increase in amount of webbing on your plants, typically that means that it's working. If you don't see an increased amount of webbing on your plants, once again, you might have had some dead mites. Just make sure you're checking that they're alive before you apply them to your plants. But to answer the biggest question you probably have is, did it work? Did it get rid of the spider mites? The answer is, I think so. It is really hard sometimes to know with spider mites if they're completely gone or not. So after I treated the 2 treatments using the adult mites, I did start hanging the hanging sachets as a preventative measure on those 2 plants just to catch anything else that might have been left behind. Now, on my White Fusion Calathea, the damage to the leaves from the spider mites was so bad that I actually ended up cutting her 95% of her back to the soil line. This is not the first time I've had to do this for her, and every time I have had to do it, it was due to spider mite damage. And she's always come back. So here we are a little over a month later, and you can see all this beautiful new healthy growth that is coming back in on her. You guys, I know people like make a big fuss about the White Fusion Calatheas and that they're so finicky and they're so whatever. Honestly, they're tough as nails. They come back easily, they come back quickly, they come back more quickly than any of my other Calatheas that I've ever had to cut down to the soil surface. I really think they get a bad rap that they don't necessarily deserve. But I digress. Now, as far as my Hilo Beauty goes, I do think we ended up pretty well there as well. I did start using the hanging sachets as well after that, and I have seen a lot more new growth coming in on that plant, and I'm pretty sure there's some corms that have kicked off somewhere in that soil because I'm getting a lot of babies coming up in there as well. However, I did notice this week that I feel like there might be some spider mites back on that one, and I have not ordered replacement hanging sachets since, let me check my notes. Okay, middle of April was the last time that I had applied the hanging sachets. As you guys know, things have been a little bit crazy in my life, and I definitely should order some more if I'm gonna keep using them. But speaking of that, let's get into the pros and cons. So the pros here are pretty obvious, you guys. This is a truly natural method of pest control. This is as nature intended. You don't have to spray anything. There's no chemicals going on. And you can treat the plants in place. You don't have to move them into the tub or the shower or take them outside to spray them down, let them dry, bring them back, all those good fun things that you have to do when you're using some kind of pest spray. And also, you don't have to worry about the spider mites building up a resistance, which can happen with certain pest sprays. But let's move on to the cons, because for me, the cons almost outweigh the pros. So one of the biggest cons, first of all, is the fact that you can't wash off your plants. You can't dust your plants. You can't do anything that is gonna remove the bugs. So if you're used to showering off your plants every time you water them, you can't do that. You're just gonna be washing all your beneficial bugs off with the bad bugs. So you kind of have to just let them sit. And if they develop a lot more webbing, like what happened on my White Fusion Calathea and the Hilo Beauty, you're just gonna be sitting there looking at that webbing until you feel confident that all of those bugs are gone, and then you can wash it off before you do another like hanging sachet prevention. That one was a big one for me where I was kind of like, eh. And then obviously having these things hanging on your plants is not exactly aesthetically pleasing. As a matter of fact, everybody who came into my house while I was experimenting with these, it's like, what the heck is that? And then they looked a little creeped out when I told them they were bags of bugs. And yeah, a lot of people kind of acted like they didn't want to come hang out with me for a while after that. But that's another thing. If you are going to be creeped out by the fact that you're introducing bugs into your home, that's definitely going to be a con for you. Now, the other obvious issue here is if you're using the hanging sachets for prevention, once again, you don't know if that plant actually has spider mites on it or not. You put these beneficial bugs on there and they have nothing to eat. They're just going to end up dying, or in the case of some species, they are going to turn cannibalistic on each other, and then eventually they're all going to die anyway. So that's kind of like not an ideal situation, but once again, it's just so hard with spider mites. Like I said, they'll be there and you won't know it for a while. And if it was something like mealybugs where it's easier to see with the naked eye, you know, you wouldn't necessarily need to buy the pests until you saw it, but with spider mites, it's just a whole nother ball game, you guys. You know how much I hate them, and that's one of the reasons. Now, the other big con, and this is gonna apply to all beneficial bugs, you guys, is the cost. It is not cheap. I calculated that I spent $187 over the course of 2 months on these separate applications. And honestly, you guys, it's not even the bugs themselves that are expensive, it's the shipping. The shipping is ridiculous. I forget what the flat rate is. It's a flat rate, like no matter how many you order. So in your brain, you're thinking, I want to order as many as possible so I'm getting my money's worth on my shipping, and I'll flash what the flat rate for the shipping was up on screen for you. But the problem is you can't just order a bunch because you can't store them, right? You can only store them for 48 hours. So you literally can only buy what you need at that moment. And no matter how much that is, you're still going to be paying that amount in shipping. So from that standpoint, financially, it's going to be a difficult one to swing. However, there are some local Facebook groups that I'm a part of in my area that get together and do group beneficial bug orders so that that cost for shipping can be spread out more over individual people. So always check your Facebook groups and see if maybe somebody is doing something like that, or if they're not, see if you can't start it up. Now, another con is the fact that pest sprays, you have to be very cautious. Hi, Theo. I'm getting my leg cleaned by Theo right now. But anyways, so pest sprays. You cannot use pest sprays at the same time that you're using beneficial bugs unless it is a certain type. And there is a blog on Nature Good Guy's site. I did have a hard time finding it directly from their website, so I'll place a separate link just to that in the description for you. And it outlines what ingredient and pest sprays you can use that won't kill the beneficial bugs, which ones you can use, but you have to wait 2 weeks after before using the beneficial bugs, and which ones I think they just don't recommend at all. But the list of ones that are acceptable is pretty small, and a lot of those ones that were listed, in my experience, aren't necessarily the best ones to actually get rid of spider mites in the first place. And so yeah, you really just kind of have to choose one or the other. And for the most part, you always want to make sure that you wait 2 weeks after your last pest spray treatment on a plant to actually start trying the beneficial bugs. But I'm sure you guys might have noticed when I was opening that order that there were some live ladybugs in there as well. They were running a promotion at the time where I think as long as you placed an order of like $50 or more or something like that, you got a free order of like live ladybugs. Honestly, you guys, those live ladybugs got released outside in my flower bed, and that is because I have tried in the past before ladybugs. So let's talk about ladybugs as pest control next. So they pretty much will feed on almost anything, and so they have listed here aphids, mealybugs, spider mites, thrips, and other soft-bodied, slow-moving insects. Sounds great, right? Anybody who's tried ladybugs in their house will probably know the #1 issue with ladybugs. But let's talk about how to use them first. So you're going to store them in your fridge until nighttime. You always want to release your ladybugs on your plants when it is dark outside, and you're going to follow their directions about how many to put per plant based on the size of the plant. Now, the reason you have to release them at night is because they are attracted to light. And as you probably are aware, ladybugs fly. So here's what's gonna happen, you guys. You're gonna sprinkle these on your plant, you're gonna go to bed, you're gonna wake up in the morning, and they are gonna be everywhere but on your plants. They are gonna have flocked to your windows, they are gonna be crawling all over your windows, they're gonna be falling onto you. This is exactly what happened the one time I tried to use ladybugs in this household. It was a nightmare. They would not stay on the plants. And then the other thing that is horrible is over the next few months, you're just gonna be finding dead ladybugs everywhere, and dead ladybugs are not fun, at least in my opinion. And honestly, you guys, for flying insects that are beneficial bugs, honestly, the larvae are what you want anyway. Ladybug larvae eat way more insects in a given day than the adults do, and they can't fly. So they stay where you put them. However, most places I have seen don't sell ladybug larvae, they only sell live ladybugs. But there are some other flying-based insects that are really popular. So the next one I want to talk about are green lacewings. And give me a second to get to the right page so I make sure I don't forget to tell you something. Okay, here we are. So the nice thing about green lacewings is that you can buy them as eggs that will then hatch over time. They come on either hanging cards or in what is called, I believe, a hanging French fry bag. And kind of like your hanging sachets with the predatory mites, you just hang them on your plants, they hatch over time. They then become larvae that eat the crap out of anything that is on your plants before turning into adults that then can fly away from your plant, which is typically what they then will do. You will then have bugs flying all around your house. So if that is going to annoy you, there is con #1. Now, a lot of people will just end up opening their windows or their doors to let them fly out. If you're fine with that, then this might be a good option for you. But let's talk about what pests they work on. So they have listed here aphids, leafhopper nymphs, spider mites, mealybugs, thrips, whiteflies, moth eggs, scale, and other soft-bodied insects. So they do work on a lot of different pests. That's why so many planty YouTubers out there use them. But there are still some cons. And perhaps the biggest one, and Nick Pileggi was the last person I remember seeing in a video talk about this, is that the babies can be very nippy. So typically they stay on the plant, they aren't gonna get on you and be biting you, and they aren't gonna get on you at all until they're adults, and typically they don't bite. However, The larvae tend to, and if for some reason they just decide they're going to go after you, it can be highly annoying. You can end up with a bunch of little red bumps and things like that. That is a big con in my book. Now, another con is just like with the hanging sachets and the release boxes for the predatory mites, it's not exactly aesthetically pleasing to be having them hanging on your plants. Now, I probably should have mentioned at the start of talking about green lacewings that I have tried them once when I tried the ladybugs. So I bought the live ladybugs at a local nursery and it came with a thing of eggs of green lacewings. Mine never hatched, you guys. I waited for weeks and weeks and weeks. They look like little alligator-shaped little bugs that are kind of crawling around on your plants when they hatch. And I looked and I looked and I looked and nothing ever happened. And I'm not the first person I know who has tried them and they've never hatched. So this is always going to be a potential issue with all beneficial bugs when you're buying them as eggs. They may just never hatch. So you really have to pay close attention and try to pick a company that you know will send you a replacement at no additional cost. Otherwise, you've just wasted money. But while we're on the topic of flying beneficial bugs, there are some other ones that you guys have probably heard about, and I think some people don't realize that they fly and you're going to have the exact same problem that you do with ladybugs because they're actually a beetle. So ladybug is a beetle, and there are other beetles that are in the same family as ladybugs, and one of them is what is known commonly as a mealybug destroyer. And these bugs are great for destroying mealybugs, that's why they have that name, but they are just another type of ladybug. You're going to have the same problem with them not wanting to stay on your plants. There is also something known as the pirate bug, which I think is also a beetle. Give me one second. Okay, it doesn't say it's a beetle, it kind of looks like a beetle to me. It just says it's a flying insect that attacks all mobile stages of thrips. So once again, this might sound like, oh, the pirate bug specifically targets thrips, but as I mentioned to you, there are spider mites that do the job as well that don't fly, so you don't have to worry about them not staying on your plants. But there is one other type of beneficial bugs that I want to talk about today, and that is ones that work on issues that are in the soil around the roots. So there are two different types of beneficial bugs that you can use for root problems. However, one of them is a predatory mite. And the problem with this particular predatory mite is that you cannot use it in combination with the predatory mites that we have already talked about before because it will eat them. So for that reason, I would not recommend using, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce this one, you guys. Here it is. I would not recommend using this for your soil pest. Now, soil pests can be a number of things, but the biggest one that we probably want to get these for is fungus gnats. But there is an alternative that is just as good to this predatory mite for fungus gnats and other root issues, and that is beneficial nematodes. Now, there are multiple types of beneficial nematodes, but the specific one, let's see if I want to try to pronounce this one or not. Nope, I'm just going to flash it on screen for you. But this particular one is the one that you're going to want to get for your houseplants. These work on there is a list of a lot of pests here and all the different types of nematodes and what works for what. But I did mark some of the ones that were key for us. So this particular type of nematode will work on fly larvae. It will work on fruit flies. So if you actually have a fruit fly issue going on in your house, definitely will work for that. Will work for fungus gnats, root aphids, thrips, and woolly aphids, and then it also says and more, so who knows. But this is the one that I would recommend if you are having problems with fungus gnats especially, and you aren't having luck or you don't like using the mosquito dunk or the mosquito bits like I do. This would be a good alternative for you. So nematodes, you guys, are just microscopic worms. I know the second I say worms, I'm going to lose somebody here, but they are microscopic worms. You really honestly can't even see them, so maybe that will make you feel a little bit better about them, but they just live in the soil. They feed off of the nasty things in the soil and kind of help to keep all of those soil-based pests under control. And to use these nematodes, it's really simple. They come in a pouch, so it just kind of looks like a powder. You mix it up, once again, just following their directions for how much of the nematode to how much of the water, and then you basically just water your plants with it. And apparently they don't have to be reapplied that often. According to Nature's Good Guys site, they only have to be applied seasonally. So if we're assuming that means once every season, that would be 4 times a year. So that's definitely something to consider if you are having a really bad fungus gnat problem, even if it's just to kind of get it under control. And then you can start doing the mosquito dunk or the mosquito bits or something like that to kind of help then keep it under control. So let's recap here real quick, you guys, because I do realize that I went through this based on the type of beneficial bug, but I want to show you really quick the pests that you might be having an issue with. So for example, mealybugs, and which of the bugs we talked about today you could use for that. And actually I'm gonna put the ones I would recommend you use for that, because like I said, those mealybug destroyers, they're not gonna wanna stay on your plant. So this is what I would recommend if you wanna try beneficial bugs to treat for mealybugs. If you are having a problem with thrips, this is what I would recommend you try in that situation. If you are having a problem with spider mites, here's my recommendation. And once again, you guys, you need to check the specifications for the predatory mites and make sure you're getting ones that work for your environment in terms of humidity and temperature. If you are having a problem with whiteflies, once again, here's my recommendation for that. Aphids, this is what I would recommend for those. Root issues such as fungus gnats or root aphids or anything else kind of like that, here is my recommendation. I think that, oh, scale. Here's my recommendation for scale. I am probably going to forget some pests, you guys. If I do, just comment down below and ask what I recommend for that, and I will let you know. I feel like I just hit all the big ones though, right? I think I got all the big ones. But the main takeaway here, you guys, for me is I think beneficial bugs are great if especially you can find a group of people to constantly order them with, so that you're able to break up the cost of that shipping. That is really going to make it a more affordable option for you. It's still not going to be cheap though, so you're just going to have to take it into consideration in your own current circumstances, both financially or just how many plants you have, because like I said, having to spray them all the time when you have like 300, this might be a better option for you just from a time standpoint. But for me moving forward, I am going to probably be using beneficial bugs for active infestations. I really do think it helps very much with that. And then I think what I'm probably going to do is just use the preventative measures, maybe those 2 times a year where we really start to see the uptick in spider mites, which is usually in the spring and then sometimes in the fall right before they start to go dormant. Although in my experience, it's usually in the springtime, early summer is when things start to go crazy in my house, which is why I chose to experiment with these now. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I hope it's taught you something about beneficial bugs and maybe helped you make a decision on if it's something that you might like to try using yourself. If so, please be sure to click that like and/or subscribe button down below, and I look forward to seeing you guys again next time. Aloha!